Today's webinar is organized by the SDG Youth Constituency and the Renewables Technology, and we are partnered with IEA in order to bring this webinar to reality. And SD7 itself, the SD7 Youth Constituency is a global network of young change makers who are committed to advancing sustainable energy solutions. And our mission is to empower young voices and equip participants and equip young voices and communities to accelerate energy transition in their own context. So it's a pleasure to have every one of us here on this webinar. And we have with us here our two speakers from um, the International Energy Agency. But before we go into that, I would like Shalom to introduce herself as well.
Thank you so much, Abdullahi. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to have everyone join us again. My name is Eva Shalom Chilaro. I'm the founder of Renewables Technology, and it's an African-based organization that is focused on climate change advocacy, clean energy, technology deployment, and also skills development of people at the grassroots level. And we are really pleased to have this partnership with the SDG 7 Youth Constituency to drive this work.
Sharon.
Shalom, I think we lost your audio. Perhaps you are muted.
Oh my
Can you
God.
please check?
I'm so sorry. I thought I was
We heard the
speaking.
first part. It only cut halfway through.
My apologies. Hello, everybody. I'm Eva Shalom Chilaro. I'm the founder of Renewables Technologies, and Renewables Technologies is an African-based organization that is expanding its reach across the global regions. But what we basically do, we focus on climate change advocacy and clean energy deployment, and also skills development of young people at the grassroots level. And it's a pleasure to be here, joined by the distinguished International Energy Agency, and I can't wait to hear so much from the section. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shalom, for that introduction. So we have a lot of interesting lineups for this event, so we don't like to keep us on our toes. So I would like to introduce to us our first speaker for today's event. That's Lucas, and Lucas is an energy efficiency analyst at the International Energy Agency, and he is the lead author of the 2024 Energy Efficiency Market Report, an annual publication analyzing global trends in energy efficiency markets and policy. And interestingly, we'll be getting to hear about that report right on this call. And you can be sure this is a very special webinar because this is probably the first public space where this report will be presented, perhaps. But it's really a very interesting one to hear. Lucas, before joining the IEA, he worked for several years as an energy efficiency policy advisor for the government of Netherlands. So permit me and join me in welcoming Lucas to please give us his presentation.
Thank you very much, and hello everyone. Nice to see everyone, and thank you for the invitation for us to speak to you about energy efficiency, the doubling of energy efficiency. I look forward to telling you a bit about our new report, Energy Efficiency 2024, that came out just yesterday. But I'm also very happy to engage in any questions you might have or any comments you would like to make, because it's also nice for us to learn from your experiences. I'll try sharing my screen now, and you can let me know if that works, but I think it should be okay. Someone can give me a thumbs up if it works. I see a thumbs up. That's good. So today I'll talk a bit about energy efficiency. Of course, the webinar is called Tripling Renewable Energy and Doubling Energy Efficiency, and I'll be focused on the second part of that, the doubling of energy efficiency. Of course, I think most of you are aware what energy efficiency is and what the doubling of energy efficiency means. But I thought it would be useful to have a very short, quick recap on where this doubling of energy efficiency came from. And here we see a picture of last year, approximately 1 year ago, the COP28 Climate Summit in Dubai. And this is where governments around the world came together to collectively agree to double energy efficiency improvements by 2030. And for energy efficiency, this was quite a historic milestone in the global policy arena, because it put energy efficiency for the first time in the real spotlight globally. So this was an important milestone last year. And in the Energy Efficiency 2024 report, we analyzed trends since the 28th agreement, and we have analyzed what happened in the past year. So now that we have a little bit of context about the big picture, it's time to dive in some of the numbers in the report. But perhaps first good to explain how in the IEA we measure energy efficiency progress. In the IEA, we measure energy efficiency progress as the change of the energy intensity of the global economy. That means that if we use less energy to produce the same amount of outputs, the world as a whole is becoming more efficient. And that change in energy intensity is driven by different factors, such as GDP, economic growth on the one hand, and energy demand on the other hand. So to better understand the trends in energy efficiency this year, it's therefore useful to first turn our attention to energy demand. And in the past few years, we've seen that there have been quite a few external shocks to energy demand, starting with the COVID-19 pandemic, which, for example, saw transport energy demand decrease quite a bit because people could no longer travel in the way they might have liked to. And then afterwards came the global energy crisis in 2022 and 2023, which also saw severe shocks to energy demand. And last year, we saw energy demand globally recover slightly, growing by 1.7% approximately, partly driven by increased demand in industry. And this year, our estimates for 2024, and they are estimates as the year hasn't ended yet, indicates an energy demand growth of around 2%. Energy demand is influenced by different factors. On the one hand, you have structural and activity effects that push up energy demand, such as more people getting access to energy, but also more people, especially in advanced economies, using more energy per person, for example, they're driving bigger vehicles or living in bigger homes. And on the other hand, with energy efficiency that tries to temper some of that demand growth and decrease that demand growth a little bit. And the balance between these two forces determines the overall direction of energy demand and is an important determinant for energy efficiency progress globally. One of the areas that we could see interesting trends in the balance between these two factors is the demand for cooling in 2024 and the corresponding effects on electricity demand. We've analyzed peak electricity demand for different temperature levels, and we can see that at higher temperatures, when air conditioners are most often turned on and they have to work the hardest, the peak electricity demand increases more. And what's interesting is that in the past few years, we've seen these curves shift upwards. And what's driving this, well, the main thing driving this is increasing heat waves. Of course, last year we saw was the hottest year on record, but this year is already on track to beat that. Many countries in the world have experienced extreme heat waves and extreme temperatures of sometimes up to 50 degrees Celsius. And that has driven the need for much needed and sometimes life-saving cooling technologies, such as air conditioners. However, most of the air conditioners sold today are not the most efficient models yet. As a result, pressures on electricity demand are going upwards. If the world would accelerate energy efficiency progress and switch to more efficient air conditioners, some of these upward trends could be mitigated slightly. The second important driver of global energy efficiency progress is how much money is flowing to efficiency, the level of investment. This can be investment from businesses who buy more efficient industrial motors, but also governments increasing their subsidies for energy efficiency. But interestingly, most investment in energy efficiency comes from people at home, like you and I. It can be people investing in more efficient buildings or buying more efficient appliances. Since 2019, we've seen that global investment in energy efficiency has increased until 2022 quite rapidly. And since 2022, growth in investment in efficiency has remained relatively flat. You can see from the bars here. And in 2024, we also expect global energy efficiency investments to grow moderately weekly by around 4%. An interesting development in 2024 is that several emerging markets, such as in Africa, in the Middle East, and in Latin America, see some of the fastest growth in efficiency investment. However, that's unlikely at the moment to shift the global total, as these markets represent still less than 5% of total global investment. As with most clean energy investments, that's still heavily centralized in China, Europe, and North America. Now that we've seen some of these drivers that affect global efficiency progress, it's time to now see how these forces have come together to shape the level of progress in 2024. And our analysis shows that in 2024, we expect global energy efficiency progress to be slow, around 1%. You can see in the light blue bar here. That's similar to last year, 2023, and significantly lower than the required rates in the COP28 target to double energy efficiency progress by 2030. However, that means at the moment, the world is not on track yet to achieve its ambition, to turn its ambition on energy efficiency into action. However, we have seen that many countries have managed over the past few years to reach higher levels of energy efficiency improvement, sometimes even up to 4%. 9 out of 10 countries globally have reached the level of 4% in the previous decade, at least once. That means that accelerating energy efficiency progress is possible, but policy implementation and effective policy implementation needs to ramp up to reach those levels again and sustain. Now that we've seen a little bit of, okay, what is the global ambition? Where has recent progress brought us? And what are some of the drivers behind this? It's also good to remind ourselves of what's at stake. What would the world get from accelerating energy efficiency progress in the coming years? The first thing is that energy efficiency is crucial for the transition away from fossil fuels. For example, in the IEA's COP28 full implementation case, which is a pathway that assumes all energy targets of COP are implemented in full and on time, we can see that global oil demand could decrease by up to 24 million barrels per day by 2030 compared to IEA's stated policy. Measures related to the doubling of energy efficiency can contribute up to 2/3 of that reduction. And many countries already have policies in place to accelerate that transition away from oil. For example, Canada has a program for low-income households to replace their oil heating systems in their home for efficient heat pumps. And just very recently, India announced a major new policy update for electric vehicles, such as electric scooters, electric rickshaws, and electric buses. Secondly, energy efficiency is crucial for affordability. Our analysis shows that energy efficiency is both one of the best ways to structurally lower energy bills, and it's one of the best ways to increase access to affordable energy services by lowering energy costs. Not only are many efficient technologies already cost competitive with inefficient models, so you can often buy them for roughly the same price, but over their entire lifetime, they're even significantly cheaper due to their lower energy use. That's true, as we can see on the slide here, for refrigerators in Ghana, but in the report, we've also analyzed air conditioners, heat pumps, and electric vehicles in a number of regions, including other countries in sub-Saharan Africa, but also in Latin America and Southeast Asia. So we've seen that policy is the way to accelerate progress in energy efficiency. And in the report, we've also analyzed what is happening in the world of policy. We can see in 2014, there were a lot of policies already available. This shows minimum energy performance standards, sort of rules for how much energy a product can use for different technologies. And we've seen that policy has ramped up across all these different technologies. If I click here for the 2024 bars, you can see that everywhere they're higher. So a bigger percentage of global energy use is covered by regulation for energy efficiency, which is a very, very positive development globally. Some of the interesting policy trends in the past year are, for example, the Southern African Development Community that introduced harmonized regional standards for air conditioners and refrigerators. but also new standards for vehicles in Chile and Australia. And in industry, we see that both India and South Africa have new policies in place for industrial motors and to accelerate the transition to more efficient industry. Next to the scope of policy, just how many policies are in place and what they cover, it's also important to look at the stringency of the policy. How strict are the rules and how strict how does the strictness compare between different countries? On the slide here, we see an example for building energy codes, so rules on how much energy a building can consume. The colored bars indicate the range of countries. With the higher they are, the less stringent the code is, and the lower they are, the more stringent. And the takeaway message here is that you can see there's still a very large spread. So even when there are policies in place, countries that have different regulations to limit the amount of energy consumed in a building, there are big differences between countries, showing there's a lot of potential to harmonize some of these standards and make sure that that they all become as efficient as possible and as cost effective. In terms of stringency, we also saw some interesting updates in 2024. For example, the United States has strengthened and tightened their existing fuel economy standards. China has upgraded their targets for energy efficiency for 2024 and 2025. And both the EU and Kenya have seen significant progress in building energy efficiency policies. So Kenya, for example, has made its voluntary building energy codes mandatory in 2024 to make sure that the rules that are in place are actually implemented in a nice way and enforced. The IEA is helping policymakers and would like to help policymakers implement better policies and the most effective policy mixes. And we found that the most effective approach to accelerate energy efficiency policy is through an integrated policy package approach. So not single policies, but a policy package combining regulation, information, and incentives that work together to accelerate efficiency progress. And we've launched an IEA efficiency policy toolkit with practical tools and examples for policymakers to see what policy works and what countries can do to accelerate progress in the short term and what the benefits of those policies might be. Yesterday, together with the launch of the Energy Efficiency Market Report, we've also launched a new Energy Efficiency Progress Tracker. This is an online tool for free, available to everyone in the world, where you can see for different regions and different indicators what happens in recent years in terms of energy efficiency progress, energy density, energy demand, electrification. So I would highly recommend everyone after the presentation to check that out as well on the IEA website. You can find the country that's most relevant to you and see what progress has been, and hopefully it will help inform policymakers in the years to come as well. So that's a new nice new tool that we launched. Then lastly, in energy efficiency 2024, the report's available on the website online, so you can dive into all the different details. And I think there's much more information that I managed to fit in the past couple of minutes. But there are special regional focus chapters on Latin America, Southeast Asia, Africa, China, India. There are spotlights on key issues, both heating and cooling, but also on finance and investment. And there are some recommendations for governments, for policymakers on early actions that they can take to accelerate energy efficiency progress. You can either go on the IEA website to find the report, or you can scan the QR code that's now visible on the screen. And otherwise, you can send me a message and I'd be happy to help you further. I think I'll leave it there, but very open to answer any questions, discuss anything, hear from you, and of course, the presentation from my colleagues here. I'll hand it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucas, for sharing those exclusive insights from the Energy Efficiency Report. And as we have all seen, it's a powerful resource for understanding the global trends and policy that's shaping our energy path for going forward. Well, I would just like to follow up with some questions, as we have on the call people who are young energy enthusiasts, climate advocates, and even young professionals. And I'm certain we are all curious about the roles of youth in transforming our energy future. So, my first question to you would be, how can we effectively engage young people in energy efficiency initiatives and policy development?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And I think the first step has already been set by you guys today. I think all the people around the table here are young people that are engaged. And that's step one, raising awareness on energy efficiency, spreading the word on the importance of energy efficiency. And I think events like these are sort of a great opportunity for people to discuss ideas, raise awareness, and then hopefully carry that message forward. Um, Next to awareness, we've seen ambition on energy efficiency. I think that's an important step. And COP28 last year was an important moment where I think also many representatives from different youth constituencies have called for action on energy efficiency because in the end it's their future that we're talking about. So ambition is a very important next step. And I think the last step, and that's where we are now, is the action part. So the world needs to go from ambition to action. And I think that's where young people can definitely play a role. And I hope I'm allowed to count myself as part of the group of young people still. But I think that involves taking action to whatever power you have at that moment. For me, in this case, that means working on energy efficiency, analyzing and helping governments to accelerate progress in my position now. But wherever your position is, try to find the way that you can work on energy efficiency and address the issues that are there in your respective countries and become active on the topic, either through policy or awareness raising, NGOs, implementing efficiency measures on the ground. I think those are the best strategies for young people at the moment.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that comprehensive answer. So, and then the follow-up question to that would be from the market report you just presented, what are the most promising areas for investment in energy efficiency technologies and infrastructure?
So what are the most?
The most promising areas for investment in energy efficiency technologies and infrastructure.
Yeah, that's a good question. The most promising areas for investments. I think one of the things that we show in the reports that I found at least interesting is that many of the technologies necessary to accelerate energy efficiency progress are already commercially available everywhere. So we show that these technologies exist, and we don't necessarily need to invest in a lot of new things that aren't there yet. But the step now is to scale up investment of efficient technologies that are there. And I think there's an important role for government to promote the most efficient products. As you could see in the slides, for many cases, efficient technologies are already cost competitive with inefficient ones, which makes it a role for government to make sure that the efficient products are the ones that appear on the market, are the ones that people can buy, and that people then do buy in the end. So I think that's an important one. And in the report, we also have a special spotlight story on how to scale up some of this investment. And it also depends from country to country what the best measures are. Sorry, what some of these measures are. So, for example, there are some countries in sub-Saharan Africa that have a lot of opportunities in switching to clean cooking technologies. These can create big efficiency gains, but mostly improve people's lives, especially for women and children. So that's an important area of investment for some countries. Other countries might see more potential in technical efficiency measures, such as increasing the efficiency of their buildings. And some other countries might see the quickest opportunities in electrification. So switching from fossil-based heating systems to electric ones, switching from fossil-based vehicles to electric ones. So there's a lot possible, there's a lot out there already. But the question is how to scale up that investment. And one of the interesting things, I think, for efficiency, which is different from some other clean energy areas, is that most of the investments at the moment come from households, from people like you and I. And that means that there's a big role for financing institutions such as banks, but also governments, to enable consumers to invest in energy efficiency. So that can be through more affordable green loans, more subsidies to households, anything to enable consumers to make the switch to more affordable and efficient technologies without having them to cost too much in a sense. I think that that would be my main particular.
Oh, thank you. Then why presenting reports? I remember you talked about harmonized regional standards, and I would like us to bring that conversation down to policy recommendations. So how can IEA's policy recommendations be tailored to different regional and national contexts?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think we've seen some very good examples already on regional harmonization. But in terms of how the IEA's recommendation can apply in different national contexts and national circumstances, I think the important step is for countries to first take stock of where they are now, what policies are in place, and if there are policies in place, can those be strengthened? And if the policies are not in place yet, which are the areas you would like to focus on to get them in place? That means analyzing where does most of the energy in the country, where is most energy consumed, which sector to address first. But then also, for example, countries that have building energy codes already can make them more stringent and apply them to more buildings or um, enforce them well. And countries that don't have building energy codes yet can start setting them up because it takes some time, but also start with energy labeling and informing consumers about what's possible. So I think it's important for countries to first take stock of what is your starting point, what do you have, and what are your opportunities, and work from there. And what we try to do with the policy toolkits is to give recommendations that are applicable to a range of governments. So you can choose your starting points and then see what the possibilities are, so to speak.
Thank you. And my last question. The reports have highlighted that there are a lot of energy efficiency projects going on globally, and we would like to hear from you some case studies and best practices. And particularly, I would like to ask what the key factors that contribute to the success of energy efficiency initiatives are.
Yeah. Um, I think thank you for the question. I think some of the case studies that I think are really good from 2024 are some of the ones that I highlighted in the presentation for different countries that were new policies in 2024. I think in the report you'll find loads more. We have a lot of policy examples in the report of new ones in 2024. I think the harmonized regional standards that I highlighted is for me a very interesting one, because it's a very effective approach to do it together with a group of countries and to make sure that you align these standards as many products come in from abroad, for example, and then you can make sure that all the rules are the same across countries. So I think that's one very good case study. And then secondly, what I would like to say is focus on an integrated policy package approach. We see that the most effective way to progress energy efficiency is not by having one instrument, not just standards or not just incentives, but a combination of both. So you need regulation to make sure that the most inefficient products don't come on the market, or the most inefficient buildings are not allowed to be built. However, you also need, on the other hand, to promote the most efficient things, make those more attractive. And then lastly, as an enabling thing, make sure that consumers are informed about the possibilities and the benefits and the costs, and to make sure that you implement these policies well on the ground, that they need to be enforced, that the rules are followed, that the benefits end up with the right people, and that there are people who implement the measures. I think Juliette will talk a bit more about the employment and the labor side of things, but it's a very important aspect of energy efficiency that there are enough skilled workers to implement some of these measures and to make sure that progress actually happens on the ground. So this integrated approach, considering all those factors, in the end determines if a policy is going to be effective or not.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have, but the participant, I think we can get some more questions for a few minutes from the participants. I would like to read to you one or two of those. So the first question from those says, what is the IEA responsibility in the energy efficiency during transition?
Yeah, I see the question, and thank you for the question on the IEA's responsibility in the energy efficiency during the transition. And what we try to do at the IEA, what we see as our responsibility is helping governments inform about what's happening in energy efficiency. So that's why we analyze a lot of the numbers on trends in energy efficiency globally to show, and also the new progress tracker is for free available online with all the data. So inform about what's happening. And then secondly, give recommendations, advice about what governments could do, because in the end, it's up to governments themselves what they decide to do. But we would like to provide them with a range of options and show what the benefits of those options might be. And then lastly, I think we have a responsibility in bringing people together, bringing governments together to exchange best practices. If one government has a very good policy in place, let that government talk to other governments to show this works and this is why it works in my case. So I think those are three areas that the IEA at least hopes to help governments. But in the end, I think the role of the IEA is also determined by how much governments use the IEA and whether they appreciate the work that we're doing. But that's at least what we aim to do and try to strive forward to do in the coming years.
Thank you so much. I'm going to facilitate the next questions. This is a little bit long, but I'll try to ask them step by step. So the attendee is asking a question, if you can elaborate on the key barriers of significantly increasing investment in the energy efficiency sector in least developed and emerging economies. That's the first part of the question. Maybe you can answer that, then we'll just take it little by little.
Yeah, so it's on the key barriers of increasing investment in energy efficiency in these developed and emerging economies. Okay. I think the major sort of barrier to overcome there is the cost of capital. Just how expensive it is to invest in clean energy in general in some of these countries. And I think there's a major role for both governments, private sector, but also international financial institutions to make sure that the cost of capital in these countries is lower and that these investments become more attractive. So that's one. And then on the role that policy can play there, well, there are different financial instruments and business models possible to enable and accelerate that investment. So I think that's an important one. I think a sort of hopeful sign in 2024 is that we see some of the fastest growth in regions, such as in emerging markets and developing economies. And it will be interesting to see if these trends continue. But I think it's a positive development, and we'll be tracking it and monitoring it closely. But lowering the cost of capital, I think, is the first one.
Thank you so much. I believe you've answered part of this already. The second question asking about other supportive frameworks, like you mentioned, regulations and the likes. But I think the next question is around, why do we still have gaps and inefficiencies in the growth of energy efficiency, although it has been around for so long?
Yeah, it's a very, very pertinent question and quite a complicated one in a sense. I think that there are multiple ways to answer this, but perhaps an interesting angle is that in the report, we have a special focus area on environmental dumping of inefficient appliances, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa. And I think there you can see one of the issues that's maybe sometimes a bit, well, not as much center stage as it maybe should be, which is the availability of affordable, efficient appliances. So we show that efficient appliances don't necessarily have to cost more than inefficient ones, but it also means that they need to be available for people on the market to buy them, and they need to be aware that these are more efficient appliances and that they use less energy. Awareness can be accelerated through labeling, for example, a green label on the one that's more efficient and a red label on the one that's less efficient. There's a role for government there, but to prevent inefficient equipment to be exported from countries or to be dumped in certain markets, it's also important to have standards in place. And that's, I think, again, where regional harmonization of standards can help. But there's also a responsibility on manufacturers in that case to think about their supply chain and the products that they're putting on the market.
Okay. I think I might want to join this two questions, asking about the technology, specifically C-Waves technology, and then maybe a little bit insight on IEA's data collection methods?
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer those, but I would maybe propose to first turn to Juliette because I don't want to take too much time away from her, but very happy to answer those either after Juliette's presentation or even offline if there are still questions that I haven't answered yet.
Yes, and I really understand that. Thank you so much for highlighting that. And so I'll go ahead to share with us Juliette's bio. I'll just read a little bit about her, and she's going to take the floor to tell us more on the people-centered energy efficiency output. And Juliette is a policy analyst at the International Energy Agency's Office of Energy Efficiency and Inclusive Transitions. She works within the People-Centered Clean Energy Transitions Program, which supports governments to ensure their clean energy transition strategies are truly fair and inclusive, with a focus on skills, decent jobs, worker protection, social and economic development, equality, social inclusion and fairness, as well as engaging people as active participants. So we are going to be hearing from Juliette right away. And please, Juliette, feel free to share your slide. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having us on today. So wait, let me try and share my screen. Okay. Do you wait, how do I do this? Sorry. Okay, 1 second. Are you seeing my screen now? No, you're not seeing my screen, are you?
We're seeing it in presenter's view.
Yeah. So wait, let me just.
Yeah.
Now you're seeing it?
Not yet.
No, not yet. Okay, great. So this is really not working. Okay, how about this? So it might not be the best, but.
You can also send it to me, Juliette, and I can share it.
Oh, that would be great, Lucas, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Yeah, just send it and I'll share it for you.
Thank you so much. Here you go. Oops, sorry. I'm aware that I'm making us lose some time. Almost there. Here you go. Okay. Okay, well, so while Lucas is kindly helping me, I can, oh, well, look at that efficiency. Thank you, Lucas. Okay, so maybe to give you a little bit of context. So Lucas and I, we both work in the Energy Efficiency and Inclusive Transitions Office, but I myself, as you said, Ibo, I'm working in the People-Centered Clean Energy Transitions Program. And so that program specifically was, established more recently at the IEA with this, basis understanding that in order for transitions to be successful, we have to make sure that people are brought on board of these transitions, that they feel that they're benefiting from these clean energy transitions, and particularly that they're included in decision-making processes, especially when it relates to making plans about their own future. And this is particularly relevant for young people. And so as part of our work within this program, employment is really a big topic. So, some of the questions that we're looking at are, how do we ensure that job and training opportunities are accessible to all, including to segments which are currently underrepresented in the energy workforce, and understanding what the terms and conditions of these jobs that are going to be created by transitions are going to be. So I want to focus on, how are we currently answering these questions in the energy efficiency sector in particular. So I'm going to follow up a little bit on Lucas's presentation and present a little bit more about what the doubling of energy efficiency means in the employment sector for young people specifically. So Lucas, if you would kindly switch to the next slide. Thank you. So just to give you a bit of an overall picture to start with, today the energy efficiency sector employs about almost 10 million people globally. However, as you can see from the different bars on this chart, over the last years since pre-COVID, the growth in energy efficiency jobs has actually stagnated. And even within this trend, we see a lot of different regional differences. So the majority of jobs in terms of volumes has been captured rather by China, Europe, and North America, and the Asia Pacific region more globally. However, since the pre-pandemic, a lot of countries have struggled to get back to the levels of growth that they've seen pre-COVID. Some of them have stabilized, and in fact, India and Africa are one of the few, if not the only two regions where we've actually seen growth since the pre-pandemic period. So we're at this situation now where investment in energy efficiency really needs to accelerate so that more jobs are created, because there really is a potential for job creation in this sector. And in fact, if we look here at the green bar in the chart, we see that in the IEA's net zero scenario, which takes us at a level where we don't reach more than 1.5 degrees, then we're able to create more than 4 million additional jobs in energy efficiency by the end of this decade. And so, what in terms of the jobs that we're talking about, these are a wide range of occupations. So we're talking about construction workers who can build and renovate homes. We're also talking about heat pump installers as well as repairers. But we're also talking about the manufacturing sector and people who are manufacturing efficient appliances or electric vehicles. And if you don't mind switching again to the next slide. Oh, thank you. And so there's these wide range of occupations, and I wanted to give you a snapshot here. This is one of our most recent reports on energy efficiency skills in the building sector specifically. And with just this snapshot, we can already see that the types of jobs that the energy efficiency sector is going to create are going to require such a varied array of skill sets. So that means that it's also going to require training individuals for on very different timelines, from several months of training to several years of training. And an added layer of complexity with this process is that the types of certifications and the types of skills that these workers are going to need will likely vary based on the context. And that is in part due to the fact that today, in fact, the way that jobs are classified, or the way that they're named and associated to a certain set of skills varies across countries. So there isn't always a very straightforward way for people to acquire certifications, especially if they're moving between countries. And so we have this challenge where we need to train a great number of people with all these different types of skills. And if, Lucas, you don't mind switching to the next slide, that's operating against the backdrop of very significant shortages in the energy efficiency sector in key jobs that we need to achieve the doubling goals. So here you see a snapshot of jobs in construction specifically. So this is a global employer survey from this year, and we can see that here 4 out of 5 construction companies globally are currently facing shortages, which threatens the implementation of energy efficiency improvements. And what we're seeing across our own survey at the IEA with employers around the world is that we're talking both about a labor and a skills shortage. So, in certain countries, it really is about the number of workers who can actually fill these jobs. And in some other countries, and sometimes it's a double challenge, it's the lack of workers with the specialized and specific skills that certain occupations need, which are in shortage. And what we also find across our survey is that these shortages tend to be more intense for installation and repair workers specifically. So that's construction workers and electricians and plumbers. And this is interesting because it is a trend on, you know, energy efficiency employment overall, but it contrasts very much with what we know about youth employment and youth unemployment today. Because in fact, and you know, I'm citing the ILO here, but they did a very interesting report this year, which finds that in 2024, 20% of young people, so people aged 15 to 24, are neither in employment or in education or in training. Most of these people are women, and for those who do work, half of them are actually in informal employment, which tends to be less safe. It also tends to offer more precarious conditions of work and lower wages, which puts young people in very precarious situations. And added to that is also, you know, a skills mismatch problem, which we see very much exacerbated, especially in emerging and developing economies, where 2/3 of young adults that have a job that don't actually match with the qualifications and the skills that they have. So how do we address this? Well, policy can help address this issue, but it's very key that we have a policy, an integrated policy approach where policymakers work with the private sectors, with labor unions, and especially with education institutions as well, so that we're able to train and reskill workers to be able to scale up this energy efficiency workforce. And within this integrated policy approach, there really is a need to understand what kind of access do young people have in labor markets, and what kind of formal pathways to certifications can we offer them so that they can be equipped with the right skills. And so here I thought we'd look a little bit more at, you know, the current existing entry points for the younger workforce. So two major entry points that we have is vocational education and training, as well as STEM, so science, technology, engineering, mathematics, education. So for both STEM and vocational education and training, we've seen a rise in terms of the number of graduates that are enrolled in these programs. And in fact, in emerging and developing economies, we actually see some really good examples where, for example, in Tanzania or in Uganda, over the next 20 years, there's a projected 4-fold increase in the number of students that are enrolled in vocational education and training. However, both in STEM and in vocational education, we see that the rise that's happening is not enough to meet the industry demand. So I think an interesting example in this regard to really understand what's happening is Australia, because Australia this year, we found that, someone else found, but there was a finding that, you know, 60% of people who are enrolled in apprenticeships to become electricians actually drop out, and they tend to drop out in the first year of their apprenticeships. And this is really problematic because in Australia, for example, there's this looming threat because of this problem of a shortage of around 100,000 electricians by 2050, which would largely clash with their net zero goals. And so, you know, there's several reasons that are cited for these dropout rates. So a big one is low wages. So wages that are not enough, especially for students to cope with the cost of living pressures that they're undergoing. And another big factor is the dissatisfaction with the work culture. And so what this really points to is that there's a need to reimagine how is it possible to make these career paths attractive for young people, both through offering more attractive wage, whether that's sponsored by governments or the employers, but also by creating very clear pathways for them to transition both from school to work, but also in their career, how are they going to be involved within a firm or within a sector? And how do we create this safe and welcoming workplace environment, ideally with mentorship opportunities as well that can foster growth for these young individuals? And so in addition to this, you know, this point of reimagining, how can we make these qualitative and attractive opportunities, there's also really a need to make sure that the training that's being offered is actually aligned with the skills that are needed for transitions. And there also needs to be, you know, an understanding of how can we use the fact that a lot of young people, for example, tend to be more versed in emerging skills like digital skills. how can we make that a strength for them? And so if you don't mind switching to the next slide, Lucas. And so we really need to make sure that, you know, there's all this. So we need to make sure that there's attractive opportunities. We need to make sure that they're aligned with the skills that are needed. And we need to make sure that these opportunities are visible to young people, and to lower the barriers that they tend to face in accessing the energy efficiency, but also the energy workforce more broadly. And you know, we have some good cases. So you know, if we look at Canada, actually, the young people are not necessarily invisible in the energy efficiency workforce. So actually, in Canada, young people are more present in the energy efficiency workforce than in the broader workforce. But even though we have this example, and we have other examples as well. So for example, in Australia, you know, 50% of electricians are actually under 35. But as most of you will, I mean, as all of you will know, obviously age is only one determinant of identity, and we have to consider as well what it's like for young women, for example, who want to enter the energy efficiency workforce, especially in segments that tend to be male dominated, like construction, for example. What are the kind of barriers that they face, and how can we overcome those barriers? So for example, in construction, how do we make sure that women have fitted equipment? How do we make sure that they have the appropriate bathrooms on construction sites? How do we really make sure that we have this welcoming environment? And this inclusive approach really needs to start from the education, because right now we also know that in 2023, there were less than 10% of women who were actually employed in vocational employment. So that's construction workers, and you know, air conditioning, ventilation, refrigeration mechanics, installation workers, and it's very low compared to men. So so there really needs to be this sort of intersectional understanding of the different barriers that young people face, because really what we're seeing is that if we address these barriers, there's really a lot of untapped potential that we can benefit from. So I'm circling back to the Canada example here, but what we see looking at the numbers projected for last year and this year is that, and you can see it on the chart here, it's the green point. If we filled all the jobs, and that can very much be addressed by having greater inclusion in the workforce, the number of jobs in the energy efficiency sector in Canada would actually increase by 13%. And so what this really shows us is that we really need to invest in this inclusive approach when we're thinking about growing the energy efficiency workforce. And some of the best practices that we've seen in doing that is training programs that lower barriers for young people. So this includes barriers such as general cost or transport or infrastructure. But we also need to understand these overlapping barriers that some young people face, and really focus on bringing in those young people who are currently underrepresented in the energy workforce by providing them safe as well as accessible opportunities. And so with this, thank you. And so with this, I just wanted to flag that, you know, we're at the IEA, we're really thinking about, you know, how to move the needle on this. And one of the ways where we're very thankful to have youth participation and to involve young people at the table is in the convening that we do. So, you know, in April, we actually hosted the first ever summit on people-centered clean energy transitions at the IEA. So it was the first time that the IEA convened ministers, policymakers, labor leaders, employers, as well as youth representative, Indigenous people's voices, and other different experts. And we were able to gather them around the room and, you know, cover a breadth of topic from jobs and skills to equality, social inclusion, fairness, public participation. We were really glad to have actually a really good youth attendance. So we had SE for All there, SDG7 Youth Constituency, we had Student Energy, IEEE. We also had the Youth Climate Advisor to the UNSG and Youngo. And so for us, this was very, very important, because when youth are invited at the table, they have really, really good inputs. And for us at the IEA, you know, we really see this value that can be created when we connect young people with the energy decision makers. And so with this, the last thing I wanted to flag, and I'll conclude on this one, if Lucas, you don't mind switching to the last slide, is that, thank you. At the outcome of the summit, you know, there was an intention to say, how do we move from these discussion to the implementation of these ideas that are being discussed? And so at the outcome, a month after the summit, we launched the second Global Commission on People-Centered Clean Energy Transitions, which is called Designing for Fairness. And this is a convening of different members, including energy ministers, unions, employers, consumers, civil society, cities, indigenous peoples, as well as, which is key, youth, that are focused on producing different outputs to understand how do we design and implement policies that can actually lead to more equitable energy systems and that can prioritize fair and affordable outcomes. And so, you know, some of the different activities that we intend to do with this commission are sharing best practices, but also understanding what are the current measures, what are the current indicators and metrics that we can use to understand what success looks like and how do we track progress. And so again, here we're, you know, very pleased that we actually have the honor of having Hadiza Abdulmumini, who's, I think, joining this call, who's the global focal point for SDG 7 at the moment, as well as Aisha Siddiqa, who's a youth climate advisor to the UNSG, and they're both sitting on the commission and providing really brilliant inputs into these different products. So for us, really on the way to COP30, it's really, really important to have you know, youth at the table, at the conversation. So I'm really glad to be here today, and you know, I'm really echoing Lucas. If ever there's questions or any, you know, anything you want to talk about, my email is always open.
Thank you so much, Juliet, for that insightful presentation. That was really awesome. And thank you, Lucas. I see that you've answered most all the questions in the chat box already. So, so I'm going to ask this follow-up questions to Juliet, and all participants, please feel free to use the chat box to share your questions. As you can see, it will always be answered. So the first one is really peculiar to like vulnerable populations in developing countries. So we want to know how, what's the IEA's people-centered approach to address their specific needs?
Well, so at the IEA specifically, so, you know, our program, I think, really has this central focus on making sure that the benefits of clean energy transitions are distributed in a fair and inclusive manner. And so for us, what's really important is to first, you know, in our research and our analysis, in gathering the best practices that we do, consider, you know, all these different intersections that energy policy has with health, with, you know, social policy, with all these different worlds that actually intersect. But most importantly, I think, is really consulting with the representatives of these countries that we're talking about, of the different communities that are actually affected. And this is where the work of the Global Commission really becomes central. And so I want to, maybe I'll highlight here actually, you know, in the first output that the Global Commission produced, which was really at the outcome of a consultation of all these different constituents, there were 7 key considerations for fair and affordable transitions that were put together. And the intention here was really to encapsulate as many groups as possible. So these 7 considerations were how to realize decent jobs in clean energy transitions, how can social inclusion be integrated into workforce development policies, how do we deliver universal access to affordable energy as part of clean energy transitions, and how can policies ensure low-income, marginalized communities are able to afford clean energy transitions. And 3 other things that we tried to consider were, how do we ensure that clean energy policies are also maximizing socioeconomic benefits? How does policy design determine how the costs and the benefits are distributed? And how do we crucially make sure that meaningful participation is really at the heart of transitions? And so, you know, through these 7 considerations, we're really trying to work through what that means for different groups and for how that will be implemented across different countries. And we're also trying to support this at the IEA through, other bits of analysis. So that includes the market report that we just presented with Lucas, but also, last May we published a report on strategies for fair and affordable transitions, which is also key in supporting these objectives.
Thank you so much. I think the next question is more on the metrics and sort of trackers. So you mentioned a lot about your young people sitting at the tables of like the IEA summits and being a part of the board of advisors and things like that. I wanted to know, is there a particular metric to measure young people's inputs in the IEA, whether it's the report or standards? Is there a metric or framework that really puts those things in accounts?
Well, I think that's a great question, actually, because right at this moment, in full transparency, we don't have an actual indicator of this internally. We do try to maximize, every single one of our activity usually has a youth component. But we're also, we're always trying to work through how can we better integrate, young people into the work that we do in consultation process. So, we will always have, peer reviewers in our IEA reports. We also really try to, bring them into these different sort of discussions, workshops, and other high-level convenings. And it's really something that we're trying to work on, through this commission again, that I mentioned, what are these kind of indicators that we can put in not just at, the sort of IEA internal level, but also on a world scale in terms of, national commitments. How can we actually measure that and have some accountability that youth are actually participating, and what is the quality of that participation as well?
Okay, thank you so much for the response. This is my final question, and it's more on youth-led projects and their impact within the IEA. I wanted to know how you plan to keep encouraging more young people to create sustainable careers in energy efficiency. Are there programs existing or like successful youth-led projects that you can share with us?
Well, in fact, I think, as the IEA, we rather facilitate, and we're more able to highlight these types of projects and programs, and we don't actually implement them. However, we do try to, highlight some of these best practices, whether they're led by youth or whether they target youth. And I think, even within the community that's currently attending this webinar, I'm sure a lot of you are actually responsible for some of these programs. And in fact, I know that, one of the programs that we tend to highlight is, for example, student energy, because student energy is leading a lot of these, programs to deliver hands-on training to students, which is so crucial, right, for young people to actually get into whether it's, energy systems or energy modeling and dealing with data, et cetera, or more on the ground project management. So, we really try to highlight these types of programs that are youth-led. But what we also try to do is to highlight, other programs that, for example, take, another approach. So making sure that trainers are properly trained. For example, one of the programs that we were looking at recently is a program in Eastern Africa, where what they're trying to do is across a number of different countries, making sure that trainers are trained with the right sort of tools to equip students with the skills that they need for the energy transition, but that trainers themselves can work part-time on the side of their instruction job so that they can themselves keep a foot in the industry and always stay, upskilled. And there's efforts within this program actually to have a lot of women also being trained as these instructors so that they can lead by example. And I think that's also really essential to see those programs on both sides. So not just how are youth leading these training programs, but also how can we make sure that those programs are tailored to attract young people.
Thank you so much for that key response. I truly believe that the part of being an exemplary leader, using women to train others. It brings that inspiration, especially to young girls. And I will give back to Abdullahi to facilitate questions from the audience.
Thank you, Shalom. Thank you, Juliet, for that wonderful presentation. We don't have any question from the audience. And I see Lucas dropped a note and he said it's an important way for us to apply the IEA is we need to welcome young people from all over the world. Wow, thank you so much. So I guess that's the end of the first part of the show. The second part will be the panel session. So Shalom, can you please go ahead?
Um, yes, so this slide panel discussion is more to address potential challenges and barriers that you have seen to achieving the energy efficiency goals. I know you've mentioned them particularly little, but wanted to know if there are other things you wanted to share with us on barriers and challenges to achieving the energy efficiency goals.
Yeah, so I mean, sorry, just to clarify, are these questions for me or for the both of us?
Yes, I would still ask Lucas. So from your perspective, from people, skills, and upskilling and all of that, what's your take on it? Thank you.
No, definitely. So I think, I mean, one of them was, what I just mentioned. So, really making sure that not only, we create this attractive environment for young people to join the energy efficiency sector, but that the trainers themselves can lead by example. And I think one other really important thing is that we have, and I mentioned this earlier, the very clear, not just school to work transitions, but very clear transitions from the policies themselves and the sectors that they target into the training and the education world. So actually elaborating on, the example that I was just citing on Eastern Africa, I think one thing that's very interesting that they did there was that they actually involved the training and the educational facilities into the elaboration of the taxonomy, so of the classification of the jobs. And so there was a direct involvement from the training education facilities that were going to disseminate the training themselves. There was this direct link with understanding what the jobs are going to be and what skills will they require. And so I think that's something else that I did want to mention, because it really speaks to this need to really have not just an integrated policy approach, but making sure that we're also communicating with the right stakeholders. And another thing that I'll just mention as well is, the involvement of unions is also really key in that sense. So making sure that, not only that young people are encouraged by employers to have these opportunities for on-the-job training, for apprenticeships, but also that when they get into these apprenticeships or to these employment opportunities, young people can be represented and also protected by their union so that their interests can be represented. And that's particularly important in clean energy, the clean energy sector, which is much less unionized than the traditional energy sector.
Oh, that's quite insightful. I haven't thought about it that way. That might be my major key takeaway. Thank you so much for sharing that. And to you, Lucas.
The same question about the barriers for energy efficiency progress. Well, I think it will be hard to follow Juliet's answer because she answered it quite comprehensively and nicely. But I think in general, there are still quite a few barriers to energy efficiency progress. I think we talked about a few of them. So the people involved to get the stuff on the ground done. I think secondly, the investment we already discussed is an important barrier to address efficiency progress. I think political ambition and will. So governments need to decide to accelerate efficiency policies and commit to it to implement the policies and enforce them on the ground. And I think an important sort of enabler or precondition to make that happen is to ensure that everyone in the country benefits from energy efficiency measures. So they need to be affordable and accessible to everyone. so everyone can benefit from their outcomes. And policy is the way to address that, to make sure that the benefits end up at the people who need it most, and that the people who need it most are aware of the benefits of efficiency and can benefit from them. And I think that's an important one that we've started more work on this year as well. And I think that's something that we'll do more work on going forward, because the sort of inclusivity of everyone in the energy transition, I think, is the only way to get it forward. And that might be a barrier going forward if that isn't the I just saw a question pop up in the chat that I might take straight away, which is on the ways, opportunities that people might be able to join the IEA. The best way, look at the IEA website. They're always running vacancies for intern consultants, professionals. So definitely recommend all of you to apply. We can use many more young people, many more enthusiastic and ambitious young people from all over the world. I think there are nice opportunities within the IEA with other organizations as well. And if you want to learn more about what we actually do here, then feel free to reach out to either Juliet or me. I think we'll be more than happy to tell you more about it.
Thank you so much. I was just about to ask that, like, especially programs that will be open to the public that young people can leverage and apply. And okay, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing about that. And
sorry, I can interrupt for 1 second, but you reminded me of something when you said programs. I think another thing, rather than joining the IEA as an employee, there are also many training programs that are either freely available on the IEA website now, so you can follow courses on energy statistics or energy efficiency indicators. And I think that's a cool thing that we do in the team that Juliet and I work in, is energy efficiency training weeks. So regularly there are training weeks in different locations in the world. I think the next one is a little over a month in Brazil, but half a year ago there was one in Nairobi in Kenya. Last year there was one in India. So there are regular training weeks where policymakers, but also young people involved in energy efficiency policies, come together and for a week learn everything there is to learn about energy efficiency and how they can become active in their own respective capacity. So I would also definitely recommend check those out and see if there's a training week happening at some point in the future in your area. And I'll make sure that the people organizing those continue to include you in the distribution list for those, because I think it's a nice opportunity.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that. Yes, I think it's very important to us, and maybe we would add some of those links to the meeting notes and share it with everybody so they can have access. Perfect. And thank you so much. Thank you so much, Julia. Thank you so much, Lucas, for your time. And I'm just going to say a few words on how to stay connected. I know Lucas has already mentioned from the IES side, you stay connected through the website and through the social media platforms. And I think every other of these organizations can be found on social media, whether LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. And I see Hadiza raise her hand. Okay. She's going to wrap up from the SDG 7 Youth Constituency side, and I'm going to speak from the Renewables Technologies perspective. Thank you so much. Hadiza. Hadiza, if you're speaking, you're muted.
Hi, Hadiza, are you able to talk?
Yes, I think it might be some technical issues.
Well, let me just take it from there. So, from the Digital constituency end, I appreciate everyone for being on this call, particularly our speakers, Juliet and Lucas. Thank you for sharing your insights and how we can drive the energy efficiency and renewable energy to meet our targets. And of course, thank you to all the participants for your participation and engagement throughout the session. So, and I think one particular thing that really stood out from both speakers' presentation is we all have a role to play. The youth, everyone, we all have a role to play. So, we look forward to every one of you. We encourage everyone to stay connected and continue these conversations. Yeah, 87 is one community that brings youth together under this to for these conversations and for us to ensure to mobilize youth and ensure that we realize our energy target. And just to make it easier for us, I'm going to post our link in the chat, and then we can connect through that. I think as Jesus is still on the call, let's have something for that.
Hadiza, are you able to speak?
Hi, Shalom. Yes. So I just wanted to do a quick thank you. Thank you, Lucas. Thank you, Juliet. And I'm sure we've learned a lot from today. And we thank you and the IEA for honoring our invitation. And we look forward to inviting you for our upcoming series. So thank you so much. And back to you, Shalom.
Thank you so much, Hadiza. From the Renewables Technologies side, thank you so much, Lucas, Juliet, for joining us and making this program a reality. And we've been passionate about training people, training young people. So it was such a great platform for you to come around to train more people. And thank you so much for all the resources you're sharing in the chat box. We'll try to highlight all of them and share it with all the participants after this call. And to all of the audience, thank you so much for joining. You can follow us, Renewables Technologies, on LinkedIn, as exactly as you see it, Renewables Technologies, or on Twitter or Instagram. So thank you so much for joining, and please have a great day. Thank you so much for joining, and we've
Thank
come
you
to
very
the
much
end
for
of.
having us.
Oh, we need to have the picture.
Yes, I need to have.
I
The,
would think see everybody. Can we see everybody? Maybe
yes,
you
Okay,
can.
let's have.
please allow me talk for a minute. What we can do, Adiza, Shalom, you're going to help me grant everyone access to their cameras. So I'm promoting everyone to a panelist. So if you receive a notification, please accept from your end so that you can be able to take a photo.
Okay.
All right.
While that's happening, also a big thank you to the moderators. I think you did an excellent job, and it's really nice to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you to everyone, the moderators, the organizers, coordinators.